God bless the NHS, for it was they who brought us together. During the first clapping session, I stepped onto my tiny balcony to offer up my applause, curious to discover how many of my fellow Londoners would do the same. I was pleasantly surprised, moved even by the enthusiasm with which the city responded to the call to clap our carers. From a multitude of doorsteps and open windows, people appeared to applaud, whistle, and cheer. Car horns blared in jaunty rhythms in the surrounding streets, and the sounds repeated and repeated into the distance, as if the entire divided metropolis had indeed been brought together by this moment of crisis. And that's when I saw him. Framed in a window across the street, arms held aloft to project his clapping into the evening air. He looked tall, purposeful, dignified, yet approachable. In fact, he looked exactly like the kind of person I would very much like to approach, or be approached by, and it didn't take a massive mental leap to imagine how good I would feel with those strong arms wrapped around me. So yes, hats off to the NHS. It may have saved Boris Johnson's life, but in many other respects, we have much to thank it for. Although separated by only 50 yards or so, we could be living in entirely different worlds, and not just because of the lockdown. His place has a private gateway, cobbles, and a Regency elegance. All right if you can afford it. Meanwhile, just beyond spitting distance, here am I festering in a 60s monstrosity of brick and concrete, with a defective front door and junky litter scattered in the stairwell. But it's my 60s monstrosity, and I've made it my own. It's not just the exteriors of our homes that sets us apart. My furniture is haphazard and rustic, and my walls are hung with modernist prints and abstract originals by local artists. What I can see of his place seems significantly blander. There are no posters or pictures on the wall at all. Standard issue shelving units and seating. I can't make out the titles of his books, even through my ×3 binoculars, but I sense there may be a John Grisham or two in there, or something equally mainstream. His personal style isn't much more adventurous. I've only seen his top half so far, but he never seems to wear anything but what I would call an office shirt under a plain sweater. A uniform I believe in America might be referred to as preppy. But opposites attract, right? I don't want a clone of me. The best partnerships are yin and yang, the earth and the moon. A lock and a key to open it. Plus, I'm always up for new adventures, so who knows what unknown worlds he might open my eyes to, just as I could show him the joys of being a little less straight-laced than he's been up until now. And if we tire of jousting about style or ideology, I simply need to lean into his broad chest, and that would be the stimulus for his strong arms to instinctively fold around me like the retiring petals of a flower at dusk. And that would be happiness enough for me. It was during the second clap that we properly established contact. I was there on my balcony, clapping away, if anything louder than before. I even let forth a couple of whoops. It was almost as if I was trying to attract attention to myself. As before, I looked around to see who was joining in, but I'd be lying if I said that my attention wasn't mostly focused on a certain corner flat over the way, the window at which that handsome man once more applauded. About halfway into the sacred minute, not that I was clock-watching, you understand, I glanced his way again, and he was looking directly at me, too. It was one of those moments that could easily have turned awkward, our eyes flickering out of touch as we pretended it hadn't happened. But I seized the nanosecond of opportunity to turn the accidental union into a more meaningful rapport. Keeping my eyes fixed on his and willing him not to look away, I raised my clapping hands towards him and bowed my head in a sign of humility, as if awarding him the entire appreciative cacophony personally. For a moment he looked nonplussed. He was clearly unsure how to respond, and no doubt a little surprised to find himself in communication across the gulf between adjacent housing estates with a sort of neighbour of whose existence he had been entirely oblivious until just now. I knew how he felt. For hadn't he entered my life just as suddenly and strangely only a week before? If he was in need of encouragement, it was my duty to supply it, and I duly exchanged my look of playful courtesy for a broad and very welcoming smile. They say that human beings can read facial expressions in an instant, even at a distance, but it still seemed somewhat miraculous when he caught my signal and returned it with an instinctive smile of his own. He might almost have been laughing, and I readily allowed my grin to turn into laughter too, and we shared a mirthful communion until the end of the minute, at which point we, in unison almost, gave each other a short cheery wave and turned back into our lonely flats.